Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Mandler, and I'm from Innovate EDU. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this important conversation on strengthening the teacher pipeline. We're here today because we recognize a fundamental truth. Our education system is only as strong as the educators within it, and we're committed to making sure that they have the tools that they need to succeed. So before I get started, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and you'll each get the recording via email. And we'll have time at the end of the Q&A session. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout the presentations, who they're directed at, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. Okay, so let's get started. Let's dive in. We often hear about the teacher shortage as a recruitment problem, that there aren't enough teacher candidates in the pipeline. But actually, the research is showing a much broader picture around retention and the need for ongoing support for teachers. 44% of teachers leave the profession within their first 5 years. That's almost half of the workforce. And a lot of them, what we're seeing is that they're sharing a similar sentiment, that they feel unprepared for the modern classroom. And we can't solve this issue by lowering the bar for entry. We need to solve it by raising the level of support. So today we're going to look at the why behind a lot of this data, and more importantly, how we can mend this failure. So to help us unpack this, I'm joined by an incredible group of experts. We have Wiade James and Paige Shoemaker DeMio from the Center for American Progress. They're going to share new research on the novice teacher experience and what those teachers are saying that what they need to stay. We're also joined by Aurora Dreger from the Educating All Learners Alliance, who's going to bring us closer to the classroom reality for students with disabilities and multilingual learners and how this is affecting our students. And then finally, we're joined by Sabrina Baptiste of the Pathways Alliance, who's going to guide us through some innovative preparation models that are responding to a lot of the challenges that we're going to be talking about today. So to get us started, I'm going to pass it over to Wiade and Paige from the Center for American Progress. They recently conducted a deep dive into the experiences of novice teachers. So we'd love to hear from you about what your research revealed about why teachers are leaving and what those findings mean for the policy landscape.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana. And thanks to Pathways Alliance and to Innovate EDU for hosting this very important discussion on strengthening the teacher pipeline. With so much that's going on in the public discourse about low NAEP scores and how to reverse declining student achievement, we at Center for American Progress believe that having a quality teacher in every classroom continues to be the single most important contributor to student outcomes. So very excited to engage in this conversation today. As Dana mentioned, we conducted a study based on what the research tells us, right? So 44% of new teachers are leaving the profession within the first 5 years of teaching. This is the concern that impacts the teacher pipeline, but also the quality of education that students across the nation are receiving. Despite the many challenges that we know are facing K-12 public education currently, whether it is interagency agreements to move many elementary and secondary programs out of the Department of Education to funding rescissions that actually support the preparation of teachers. We believe that we must continue to keep the focus on the national teacher shortage and policy solutions that will help to build a strong pipeline for high quality educators. So our study actually is informed by a lot of the research that's out there currently. Recently, as of last year, 2025, the Learning Policy Institute found that there are over 400,000 teacher positions that were either unfulfilled or staffed by teachers who were not fully certified in the specific subject area. So this is contributing to, this is due to the fact that we have a dearth of just people who can staff a lot of the teaching vacancies that we have across the country. And there are a lot of factors, right, that are contributing to the national shortage. Obviously, there is the declining enrollment in educator preparation programs. Fewer college and high school students are wanting to pursue teaching due to a variety of factors that we'll go over as we talk about the reasons why teachers are leaving the profession. We also know that there's high attrition among experienced educators and novice teachers that also contributes to the demands. Actually, 90% of annual teacher vacancies are due to attrition of educators. So these statistics for CAP led us to take a closer look at the reasons why early career teachers who are within the first 3 to 5 years of teaching are leaving the profession, right? These are individuals that we want to retain. They are the future of the teacher workforce. So it is very concerning to see a high turnover of this population. So not only did we want to learn why they were leaving the profession, but also what policy solutions that they would like to see from state and federal lawmakers to increase their retention, which Paige will go over in the next few slides when we talk about policy solutions. So in our analysis, we looked at the fact that 31 states currently mandate participation in new teacher induction programs. As was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, induction is a core part of retaining teachers, right? So not all states are currently mandating participation in new teacher induction, which is something that we can improve on. So our study sought to investigate what are the experiences, what are the factors that are leading early career teachers to leave the field, given that 1 in 3 early career teachers reported not participating in a formal induction program. I think that tells us that induction is a strong part of the retention process for these educators. Next slide, please. So in terms of why early career teachers leave the classroom, of the teachers we surveyed, there was a national sample of about a little over 300 teachers with 5 years or less teaching experience. These educators represented all sort of preparation experiences. 80% had traditional 4 year preparation, comprehensive preparation, whether at a public or private institution. And then the other 20% had participated in an alternative preparation program. About half were IHE-based program, higher education-based program, and the other 9 or 10% were non-IHE-based programs. So 92% of our participants actually identified as current classroom teachers. So those we surveyed were mostly individuals that are still in the classroom, and roughly 7% that were no longer teaching. 50% had left after 5 years in the classroom. So hopefully these demographics kind of give you a sense of, provide some additional context to when we talk about the findings and what teachers are saying. So nearly 70% of teachers reported that they either have considered leaving or have already left the classroom. And the top reasons for leaving were working conditions, lack of support, and level of pay. So for pay, it was interesting when we probed further into the level of pay. 64% of the participants disagreed or strongly disagreed with the statement that my pay adequately reflects or reflected the standard of living in my area. This shows that pay is a major concern for a lot of teachers. And 60% did not feel like their pay was enough to support themselves and their families, right? It's important to note that pay is referring to not just base salary, but also benefits and total compensation package, which directly speaks to some of the solutions that the participants actually proposed in the survey. Things like, mental health days, which we'll go over later on, not just thinking about base salary, but overall pay, benefits, and compensation was a major factor. Lack of support suggested that participants felt like the lack of classroom and instructional support, thinking about support from their school leadership and administration was lacking as well. Working condition included sort of the demanding nature of the teaching job, maybe demanding teaching assignments of classrooms, long work hours, the stress of the job that leads to exhaustion, and also just like poor educator well-being and mental health for educators. And then those who selected other, the 30% noted reasons for leaving or wanting to leave the profession included things like political influences in education, accountability issues, student behavior, and challenges with administration and parents. So now I'm going to turn it over to Paige to dig a little deeper into some of the policy solutions that the participants shared.
Thank you so much, Wiade, and it's great to be here. As Wiade mentioned, based on those findings, we really wanted to dig deeper to understand what policy solutions early career educators wanted to see to support them to stay in the classroom and ultimately be successful. So we gave educators a list of policy issues to rank based on what they felt should be addressed most immediately. And that's what we have here on this slide right now. So educator pay was one of the top issues that educators wanted to be resolved quickly. And then we have educator benefits, mental health supports, access to affordable housing, access to high quality professional development, and career and advancement pathways. Looking at this, so we wanted to probe further on each of these issues and really understand from these early career educators what policy solutions they believe would be the most beneficial to them. You can go to the next slide. So looking at participants' answers, kind of through the lens of those top 3 reasons that they listed why they would leave the classroom: poor working conditions, a lack of support, and low pay. We can see that early career educators have a lot of different ideas of what they want to happen to be able to keep them in the classroom longer. So when looking at poor working conditions, educators were very interested in having contractually binding mental health days, ensuring consistent, dedicated time for planning and collaboration. When it comes to professional support, the early career educators were very interested in having access to PD funds and those that could be used specifically to pay for courses or experiences that teachers found on their own that they felt would be relevant to their courses and what they needed to really be more successful and further support their instruction. They were also really interested in teacher to teacher and school to school learning networks. And then finally, more opportunities for tiered certifications and advancement pathways, and making sure there are very clear pathways to reaching those certifications. Finally, when it comes to compensation, interest in increasing salary floors. As Wiade mentioned, there was a strong amount of participants who noted that their pay didn't meet the standard of living in their area, that it wasn't enough to support their families. Along with that, when it comes to compensation, looking at student debt and ways to make earning a teacher degree more affordable, and also eliminating student debt for those who are already in the classroom and have accumulated that debt. Also interested in offering housing stipends and expanding paid leave, including sick time. So a wide range of options when it comes to compensation. Like Wiade mentioned, we're not considering just what is the salary, but what are the other parts of that compensation package and how can we support educators more wholly. A couple of things that really stood out to me and are good examples of why we think it is really important to bring educators to the table to hear what they actually need. When it comes to mental health support, the second most selected option was that mandated planning time during the workday. And that was very close to the top choice as well, which was these contractually binding mental health days, just 7% less. So these were 2 very similar responses. I think it's interesting here. This is a policy that isn't specifically focused on mental health, but it provides teachers with a more supportive work environment, allows them the time to get essential work done, and getting that done while they're at school rather than having to take work home. Another one that was really interesting to me, when we looked at housing, access to affordable housing has been an issue that's been discussed a lot lately for educators. And we see a lot of times proposals to build teacher apartment buildings. But this was by far the least desired policy solution, with less than 2% of our participants selecting it. Instead, respondents were much more interested in housing stipends. About 63% selected that, which just give them the freedom to choose where they live while still providing support. So I think just very interesting and important to bring educators to the table to see that sometimes the solutions that are being proposed right now aren't necessarily the solutions that educators think will be the most beneficial. In addition to these solutions, based on our findings, which show gaps in educator prep and development, particularly around the induction programs, we also made recommendations to strengthen induction programs by including mentorship, content-related professional development, personal development plans, and affinity groups, and making sure these programs run for at least the first 2 years of a teacher's career to really make sure that they're getting that support for a longer period of time to help them stay in the classroom longer. So ultimately, we are very proud of this part of our report and being able to share what educators actually want to see at the end of the day, what policy solutions would be most beneficial to them. With that, I will kick it back to you, Donna.
Amazing. Thank you, Wiade and Paige. I think that distinction between surviving and thriving in those first few years is so critical, and what those conditions need to be. And it's clear that policy needs to be informed by the actual lived experience of teachers, of the people that we're asking to be doing this work day in and day out. So now I'd love to turn it over to Aurora Dreger from the Educating All Learners Alliance to hear more about how all of this is landing in the classroom.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks. It's great to be here today, and it's great to be in conversation with these wonderful colleagues and experts. Thank you, Wiade, Sabrina, and Paige for joining the conversation. So my name is Aurora Dreger. I am the project director of the Educating All Learners Alliance, or EALA for short. And we're all about supporting students who learn differently, students with disabilities, multilingual learners, anybody who's traditionally had a barrier to their learning, and all the different ways that your identity intersects with who you are as a learner are all things that we're thinking about, especially as we're thinking about the reality of modern classrooms. The stakes are high for our students, regardless of whether you are diagnosed with a learning disability, whether you have an IEP, a 504. Studies show, a study from the NCLD shows that 1 in 5 students have learning or attention issues such as ADHD or dyslexia. But the reality is that no matter what your specialty is, if you're a general ed, special ed teacher, an IT specialist, or a custodian, you're going to be interacting with and coming in contact with and being in an educational community with students who learn differently. So taking that and applying that to what's actually going on in the classrooms, most school systems were not originally designed with learner variability at the center. I've heard a saying, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that if you took a time traveler from the 1800s and you dropped them into our society, they'd be really surprised with everything except maybe the way classrooms are still run. Our school system is definitely not designed with learner variability at the core. That's something that we're always trying to address at our respective organizations, and many of our viewers today and our guests today understand the push to kind of systemically change what's going on in our schools. So, as I said, regardless of your specialty, you're going to teach students with disabilities and multilingual learners. And what happens is that because most systems weren't built for learner variability, teachers have to retroactively adapt. They're forced to work harder, to differentiate instruction, to find time for co-planning if there's co-teaching. All of these things that are incredibly supportive for our students, right? Co-teaching is a popular model for inclusive classrooms. Many new teachers are placed into these roles, often without adequate training on how to share a classroom or how to, align. And something that Paige was referring to in the previous slide is like, where do you find the time to meet with your co-teacher or, build all of these different differentiated, pieces of your lesson plan? You're being forced to kind of retroactively fit your training to adapt to all different learning environments or all different learners. So that is going to lead to faster burnout, right? You're asking teachers to put in time and energy, hours, especially new teachers. This is something that I've seen it myself. I was a New York City public school teacher for several years. I was one of those teachers too that was, thrown into a classroom to say, okay, somebody's absent today, Dreger, you're going to be the co-teacher for this, you know, this inclusion classroom. And I said, okay, of course, I'm game, but I can imagine from experience, my lived experience, I know firsthand that is incredibly taxing on a teacher. So, what happens when we allow this unpreparedness to go unaddressed? I mean, the consequences are it's affecting our students. We already know that students with disabilities students with learning differences, there's already a gap in achievement. This is a persistent achievement gap. And this is just a little snippet from the NEA, the National Assessment for Education, national report card. There's a lot of red in that chart, and there's kind of a lot of stark, the disparity, the gap is really stark. It's something that, EALA, we really think about, especially through the disability advocacy lens of this is almost kind of accepted in our school system as a norm that students with disabilities are going to they're going to be far behind their peers without diagnosed disabilities. So, the data already shows a significant and persistent gap. And now when teachers aren't prepared for these specific settings, the gap only widens. But I really want to stress that this is not it's preparation over fault. This is a lack of systemic preparation support, not teacher, willingness or a teacher failure. As I said, I've kind of seen that revolving door in many schools, especially in New York City. New teachers come in really bright-eyed and full of ideals, and that's what we want in our classrooms. And some of the points that Wiade was speaking to too, some of the pressures, the stress of being a new teacher. And now you're thinking if you're a student with a disability and you've got unfortunately, this revolving door, that's where teacher retention comes in. We really can't afford to lose these experts that we have. They're already so specialized, special education, multilingual learner, MLL teachers. That's already a small group of people. We really can't afford to lose them for something that we can help solve, this lack of preparation. This is a problem that it's a sticky problem, but it's something that we can start to chip away at. Some of the ways that at EALA, or within the EALA verse, the EALA universe, we are, CAS is one of our earliest and strongest partners. They developed, as many people know, the Universal Design for Learning, UDL. This framework really sort of starts with designing from the margins, right? Centering the margins to improve the experience for everyone. I use the old example of a curb cut, right? That's an accessibility thing that helps everybody, right? So the idea with the UDL framework is to start design with difference at the center. You're going to improve outcomes for everyone. Inclusive AI policy. AI is everywhere. It's in our classrooms. And EALA, we just, in partnership with New America and several other organizations and contributors, we released a white paper on best practices in AI policy so that you're prioritizing students with disabilities in the development. And again, when you design with difference at the center, you improve for everyone. And the EALA network itself is a place to access it's a network of networks, guidance, resources, case studies. And now I say all that to say that the tools are out there, the support is out there, the resources are out there, but we can't really stop there. We really have to make sure our teacher training programs and the way that we're preparing teachers, we're not just sort of throwing them out there to say, hey, figure it out for yourself. Here's some frameworks. But I did just want to highlight that there's a lot of great work out there that's going on to support to think about how to help teachers feel and help them be most prepared for the reality of the modern classroom. So, Donna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Aurora. I think what you really hit on, for me, it's a powerful reminder that when a teacher isn't supported, it's the students that feel the impact most directly. So we've identified the research and the classroom impact. So now let's talk about the pipeline itself. So I'll turn it over to Sabrina Baptiste from the Pathways Alliance to talk about how we shift the model of teacher preparation in a way that ensures that candidates are prepared from day one. So Sabrina, off to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. I really want to build off what I've heard from my colleagues at CAP and EALA and focus on a few core ideas here. And one of them being retention starts with preparation. Cap just walked us through a lot of the data, and we know that early career attrition is high, and we know that teachers are leaving because of working conditions, lack of support, and lack of pay. ELA really grounded us that in the reality of classrooms, especially in high need settings where teachers are expected to meet complex student needs without really being fully prepared to do so, what does that look like? And I think what we're seeing at Pathways is that these two things are absolutely directly connected. The data backs this up. Nationally, there's about 15% of teachers that move or leave every year, and that turnover is, again, highest among early career teachers. And what we've heard our friend the CAP say, it's even probably a little bit more than that. But more importantly, this isn't just that people are leaving the profession randomly. We also know that nearly three-quarters of that turnover is by choice. Teachers are choosing to leave. And when you kind of dig deeper, one of the clearest patterns around teacher preparation, teachers who are not fully certified have significantly higher turnover rates. And that's about 20% compared to the 14 of the fully prepared teachers. And that gap may be even larger in the first few years. So this isn't just a pipeline issue. It's really how we're bringing people into the profession, and how we are supporting them to stay into the profession after year one and after year two. Um, we've been working very closely with Jacob Kirksey, who brought us some amazing research out of Texas, and that Texas data reinforces something that research has shown for years, and that's underprepared entry does not solve shortages long term, but nationally, turnover among early career teachers who are not fully certified is about 40% or higher for teachers who have entered their profession prepared, and have had the support that they need. We are actually seeing that greater strain on school systems. There are, of course, high turnover among teachers who have started out their profession pretty early. There's more pressure on experienced educators. As Aurora mentioned, you kind of are that person that becomes, okay, like, can you take over this class? Can you lead this? And then there's also less stability for students who are in high need classrooms. And those impacts are especially pronounced in some of the exact settings that ELA just talked about. Classrooms with students with disabilities, multilingual learners, and students that really need some of the great supports here. And the takeaway from Texas isn't that we shouldn't bring more people into the profession. I think, of course, that's very far away from the truth. It's that how we prepared and support them really does matter. And that's something that we need to be intentional about. And we often frame this conversation, you can go on to the next slide, Dana. We often frame this conversation as a recruitment challenge, but we really are seeing that it's also a pathway design challenge as well. Too many educators are stepping into a full responsibility before they've had the opportunity to build the skills, build the confidence, and the support systems that they're needed to succeed long term. And what we're seeing is that many candidates have limited classroom-based experience. They haven't had the structured opportunities to practice classroom management. They haven't worked in co-teaching environments, and they honestly have not fully been prepared for the learner variability and inclusive classrooms that we're having today. The good news is that we already know a lot about what does work in these spaces. And the research is actually very consistent here. And what actually does work is not new. We are just needing to scale it. And teachers are more likely to stay when, of course, preparation includes structured clinical experience before being a teacher of record. Mentorship and coaching along the way, that's throughout your journey, gradual release into responsibility. So there is a lot of hand holding there to make sure that folks are prepared and understand their job responsibilities. And also, I will say that there's a strong induction and support once they've actually entered the profession. So it's not about preparing folks before they walk through the door, but preparing them throughout their teacher journey and still being able to have supports that they need from beginning to end. And again, this is not about lowering expectations across the field, but it's about building pathways that are better aligned with preparation and the realities of today's classrooms. And more importantly, retention cannot just rely on preparation alone. Teachers also need supportive leadership, opportunities for collaboration, continued professional growth, manageable workloads, and compensation structures that really make the profession sustainable long term for them. And this is why you can go to the next slide, Daniel. See that one. Yeah. I think you can go to another slide too. I think there's one after that. Yes. This is why we've been focused on registered teacher apprenticeships. And these models really do a few things differently. Again, candidates are paid while they learn. So there's on the job pay there and on the job learning. They're in the classroom from day one, but they're not alone. And they also have the structured mentorship and coaching throughout their apprenticeship journey that will continuously be offered to them while they are a teacher. They also take on the responsibility gradually and not all at once, which can really combat the burden of being overwhelmed or stressed out or not understanding the nuances of the job. And that really matters for two reasons. First, it really improves the preparation of teachers that are actually receiving what's available in their environment in which they'll work in. Second, it really addresses one of the biggest drivers that CAP named, and that's the financial pressure of wanting to be in the education space. LPI also points out that teachers with student loans who have to work multiple jobs are more likely to leave. And I think that's something that we've been seeing for years. And what we have seen is that earn and learn pathways directly respond to that and really supports that in that space. And I think there's another slide after this one, Dana. Yes, so we've seen what actually works. And also, but I also want to go on to say that the other piece I want to name is that the funding is starting to align. What we're seeing federally right now, such as seed grants, are explicitly funding educator preparation, including apprenticeships. State apprenticeship expansion funds are supporting states to scale these models. There's workforce Pell Grants starting this year that can really fund related instruction, the related instruction side of teacher apprenticeships. And there's also programs like TSL and EALA that we can really support with compensation, mentorships, and system designs. So for the first time, we have a real opportunity to connect preparation, workforce funding, and retention strategies. And all of these are available now. And I don't want to be the shameless plug, but I do want to urge folks to look into some of these funds as the deadlines are approaching quickly into June. So please share with your networks. Please apply. As we see that these funds are becoming available, they are, of course, by demand. And the more that the education space is relying on these, the more that we are hopeful that more funds will become available. So please share with your networks, please apply. And also, I would be remiss to not say that we know teachers are more likely to stay when they feel prepared, supported, and financially stable. We know strong clinical experience, mentorship, and gradual entry into teaching leads to better outcomes. And we know that there are real opportunities right now to scale these models and that connect preparation, support, and retention in a much more intentional way.
Yeah.
And I'll pass it back to Jenna.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sabrina. I think that's a really strong point to end on there. And understanding what the significant gap is between how we're currently preparing teachers and what's actually needed to succeed in the profession. So now I'm going to move us into our panel discussion. We have some questions prepared for our panelists here. And then we'll move on to the Q&A. I do see some questions coming in. Please continue to put your questions in the chat. And if they're directed to a specific organization or speaker, please also write that in your question. So we'll start with the first question. This is for each organization to speak on, that number that we keep coming back to, 44% of teachers are leaving the profession within the first 5 years. That is, we're failing the system in that regard. And so my question is to what extent is that a recruitment failure versus a preparation failure? And are we setting teachers up to fail by not matching their training to the actual complexity of high needs classrooms? So I want each of you to speak to this. Sabrina, if you could kick us off, and then we'll pass it to Paige and then Aurora.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we're bringing people into the profession without always giving them the level of classroom-based experience, as I mentioned before. And they're honestly not receiving that mentorship and the support needed to succeed in today's classrooms. And to Aurora's point, especially in high need settings. And that matters because the complexity of teaching really has changed. Every teacher, regardless of the content area, is working with learner variability, multilingual learners, and students with various needs in these classroom environments. So when teachers are entering as a teacher of record too early, without the support, that without the supported practice, they're often learning everything in real time. And while you're carrying that load of responsibility, it's really hard to try to align that with student outcomes that are rooted in quality. And I think that's why when we have this conversation, we can't just keep getting just more. It's not just about getting more people into the classroom. It's also really about how we redesign pathways so that educators are actually prepared and supported. And as I mentioned before, to stay long term. The key is here quality and sustainability. And I think those are all of the things that we continue to push for.
Yeah, very similar to everything Sabrina's sharing, but I think part of this is also like an early support failure. So after early career teachers go through their preparation program, they're recruited to a school, they aren't receiving the supports that they need to make that transition and be in the classroom full time. In CAP survey in particular, when we asked how well early career educators induction programs prepared them for the job, there were a number of areas that were really concerning. Nearly half of participants reported not feeling well prepared to authentically engage with families. Over half reported not feeling well prepared to serve students with disabilities. More than 60% reported not feeling well prepared to serve English language learners, both speaking a lot to what Aurora was talking about earlier as well. And then less than a quarter reported feeling well or very well prepared in classroom management techniques. These are all obviously essential parts of the job when we think about the reality of how complex today's classrooms are. So without the preparation or early support through induction programs to learn how to authentically engage with families, to manage a classroom, and to support students with complex needs, early career teachers are very likely to feel overwhelmed. And as our survey shows, a lack of support is one of those top reasons early career teachers are considering leaving the profession as well.
I know that I made a face. Everybody jokes that I have no poker face. That Paige, when you mentioned classroom management techniques, brought me right back to my early days as a teacher and how overwhelming it feels to be in a classroom and have like inadequate preparation or support. Been there, lived it myself. So I had a little bit of a flashback moment there when you said that. It really resonated with me. And just to kind of bring it home and kind of sum up the question that Donna poses, to what extent is this a recruitment versus a preparation failure? I venture to say that this is 100% or it's a very strong percent about preparation because nobody goes into education because it's an easy job. People want to be in education because there's usually a feeling, a calling, it's a service mindset, it's a servant mindset. So the fact that we're hemorrhaging new teachers is really alarming because these are people who have already sort of made decisions like, yeah, I want to go into service, I want to serve people, I want to serve students, I want to make a difference. And so if we're not preparing them and enabling and creating the conditions where they can stay, um, pay, benefits, support, um, then that really says something about what the day in the life is or the year in the life is of the teacher. because they went into this, they wanted to do it. They knew it was going to be hard. They just didn't realize quite how hard it was going to be. So we got to be better. I'll pass it over to the next question.
Yeah, it's clear that there's a lot of reverence for the profession in this space, and sometimes that's not prioritized in society, or like that's not what we're seeing. And so I'm just really appreciating that here. And so a lot of you spoke to this already, but if we agree that that preparation and early career support are deeply connected, what are the most effective ways to start that support before teachers become the teacher of record? And what are some of the, like, where do policy levers like funding and licensure and compensation need to catch up? So, Wiade, if we could start with you, and then we'll move to Sabrina.
Sure, thanks for the question. So I think we have to first ensure that every district has a well-designed mentorship program for new teachers, and this should also apply to EPPs at prep programs to make sure that they have well-designed programs for student teachers when they're going through the student teaching experiences, right? So in our survey of the participants, only 80% identified mentorship as a key component of their induction program. That should actually be 100%, right? So all new teachers and student teachers should be participating in some type of structured and rigorous mentorship model. But the real question is, how effective are these programs, right? If 70% of teachers are considering leaving or have left the classroom, but most of them have participated in mentorship, are these programs truly effective? So I think we need well-designed mentorship programs that begin during the student teaching experience, when emerging teachers have an opportunity to learn from an experienced teacher as they apply theories they've learned in the classroom in a real life setting. Mentorship programs have not been effective. I think that's part of, I know Aurora mentioned preparation being sort of a key contributor to a lot of these issues. I think the mentorship, once teachers enter the field, haven't been effective either. So we need to think about, how do we boost that, and how do we bring that mentorship model into the preparation space? I think in order to do that, though, we need to make sure that teachers, experienced teachers who are serving as mentors, have the time and capacity to be able to provide the type of coaching and feedback that new teachers need. That doesn't always happen because they are tasked with many other things. So this often falls on like the university-based field experience coordinator to provide that mentorship to emerging teachers. So emerging teachers are not really getting the type of mentorship they need from experienced teachers, these supervising teachers, because supervising teachers often don't have the time. So I think we need to make sure that that part of the mentorship model gets resolved. How do we make sure teachers have the time to mentor, to coach student teachers while they're in these programs, so they are properly prepared and supported before they enter the classroom? And I think too, one other thing around mentorship is think about multi-tiered mentorship models, right? Where emerging teachers and new teachers aren't just mentored by teachers in their respective specialty area, but also mentored by like other content experts. Aurora mentioned like learner variability is not innately a part of our education system. How do we ensure that general education teachers who are entering the classroom for the first time have already been mentored by other specialists in disabilities, right? So I think we need to make sure parallel mentorship exists. It's critical, but also there needs to be some type of interdisciplinary mentorship where we're bringing in, special education, STEM subjects, and other areas that we know that teachers could benefit from. And then the last thing that I would say around that is the mentorship is not just about supporting students' academic skills. It's also about, how do we prepare teachers to support student life skills, right? CAP recently did some polling and focus groups, and overwhelmingly, parents want to see education not only support academic skills, but life skills. So we need to think about, how do we bring that into mentorship models and preparation programs of teachers so that they can be prepared to do that once they enter the classroom. Back to you, Dana.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering, Sabrina, if you want to speak to that question as well.
Yes, I can only echo what Paige and Wiade have said, honestly, and I want to shout it to the rooftops because I agree wholeheartedly. And Paige really drove a point home for me is like one of the most effective things that we can do is stop treating support as something that begins when someone is hired, but it does need to start prior to that. And you need support, as we already mentioned, throughout preparation. And I think that's one of the reasons that why apprenticeships and teacher residencies honestly are so important because they intentionally build that support in the pathway itself. And apprenticeship models, specifically mentor teachers, are really a part of that core structure where candidates are not navigating through classrooms alone. And to Wiade's point, getting strong mentors and also just really having somebody that you can learn alongside. And these are experienced educators who are gradually taking on more responsibility over time, and it's not happening all at once. And also, I will say a key component is that progressive wage component that also matters is that candidates need to earn and ensure that they can fund trying to become a teacher and reduce some of those financial like pressures that really pushes many people away out of the profession before they fully enter it. And I think if we're talking about funding and policy, and they're really starting to catch up to each other, but as we already mentioned, like there's still some fine tuning that needs to happen there for it to make sense and for us to really see like the big picture outcomes. But of course, we still need stronger alignment between some of these systems. And um, what we're seeing is that if that happens, then there's definitely the opportunity for us to continue to scale some of these models and for us to continue to see stronger educator pipelines.
Yeah. Thank you both for that. And I think one thing that we keep coming back to is also how this is most pronounced in settings with serving students with disabilities, multilingual learners, our most vulnerable students. So Aurora, I want to pass a question to you now. Some states have responded to this by fast tracking teachers into these specific classrooms, but the question is, are these policies actually driving the national shortage by creating churn, by creating a revolving door?
Thank you for that question because, like, there's no way to sugarcoat it. The answer is yes, because not just anybody can be a teacher. And I think that when we leave the bubble of the education sector, I mean, I spend all day talking to people who, like our panel, are committed to and understand and revere the profession of education. When I step outside of that bubble and I talk to neighbors or even family members, a lot of them say, "Oh, how hard could it be? Anybody, I could be in a classroom. I just don't want to." There's this idea that just anyone can do it. So while policies to fast track teachers to fill gaps are often good intentioned, at 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 the best, they're just misinformed. And at the worst, they're almost kind of undermining the professionalism of the field that this demands. So it's important for us as org leaders to continue to innovate and imagine creative solutions. Sabrina's doing a lot of great work. We've been talking about that with Pathways. We had a great conversation recently about, earn and learn or earn and learn, right? So that people are have a different pathway into education than what's traditionally available. But yeah, the fast track solutions at best are just not quite thought through, I think, or not quite fleshed out enough, the ones that I've seen. And at worst, they undermine um, that it's a specialized profession, just like, being an accountant, or being a doctor, you need specific training. Not just anyone can do it. So that revolving door only hurts our most vulnerable students the most. You're going to see it. That's the biggest impact.
Yeah, thank you. I do see a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to ask one final question to each of you, and then we'll go to the audience questions. So Okay, if you were designing the ideal teacher pathway from scratch today, what's the one non-negotiable that it must include to ensure that teachers stay? So Aurora, we'll start with you. We'll move to Wiade and then Sabrina to close us out.
It's got to be inclusive. And when I say inclusive, like I can be more specific. You've got to center learner variability. That's got to be built in. That's the EALA non-negotiable. I'll pass it.
Thanks, Aurora. I think for CAP, it will be redefining working conditions to move beyond burnout as a rite of passage for teachers. So we'll want to lift up policies, particularly at the state level, that codifies the time and the space that teachers need to function as professionals, ensuring that they're well-integrated contracts, as Paige noted earlier, that include mental health days as distinct categories for teachers, separate from sick leave. And really destigmatizes mental health and treats it as a prerequisite for effective teaching because teachers do need to have solid mental health to be able to appropriately educate students and manage a lot of the challenges that they're facing in the classrooms today.
Yes, I think for me, the ideal pathway would be something that's supported with progression instead of this sink or swim model. And I think some like hard things that I would love to see is that it really starts that an aspiring teacher may really start as a tutor, paraprofessional, or an apprentice, and to Paige and Wiade's point that there's a multi-year induction support once teachers are hired so that they're receiving all of these supports throughout their journey. And I think Wiade, like, yes, extra days for teachers' mental health. Absolutely, you can't beat that. So I think I might add that one too, because I love that.
Okay. I like that you entered the one non-negotiable with
Yes,
6 or so. But I think that's
it's fully
right. I mean,
loaded. It was fully loaded.
it needs to be a holistic approach, and I think that's really what we're a big part of what we're taking away from this conversation. So I'm going to move into the Q&A. We've had a few questions come in, and also a few folks sending around their own information and some resources. So I invite folks to look through that because there's a lot of opportunity to connect in this chat. So one of the questions that we had here is there a model district or school in the US or outside of the US who have a system that's built to support teachers in preparation and practice in the first 1 to 3 years? So I think we can take that question and think about what are some systems or models or services that we're already seeing that are working. Sort of supports that we see that have been successful.
I can jump right in quickly with there's organizations within the EALA network that are doing exactly that. They're building these supports, and they often go and work directly with schools and districts. So I encourage folks to look into the work of Blue Engine, of All Means All, SELF, Special Education Leadership Fellowship, Education Reimagined. Those are the EALA partners off the top of my head that are doing this work specifically to redesign systems and to build these model systems. The DC Special Education Cooperative has something called demonstration classrooms as well, where people in the DC area can contact them and actually go see a demonstration classroom of inclusive practices at work. So I encourage folks to look into those organizations as a start.
Great. Yeah, sorry, Wiade, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add two things. I know that California and New Jersey has been doing some work around teacher induction in the past. So those are places to look at when you think about induction models. I think also thinking about like the educator burnout component, AFT in partnership with Educators Thriving a few years ago released a report around the educator wellness roadmap and has some really good examples of districts they're partnering with, including the Boston area, to really support educators as a whole to ensure that they're retained in the profession. So I would encourage folks to look at that partnership and the report from Educators Thriving.
Thank you. And I believe we have time for one more Spitfire question. So that came into the Q&A. Are you hearing or involved in any conversations around transforming education to address many of these causes at the root? For example, moving to year-round schooling, addressing funding models, moving from efficiency to effectiveness.
Yeah, I think that point about moving from efficiency to effectiveness is really important. For a long time, many systems were designed around like coverage and compliance rather than what educators and students actually need to thrive long term. And I think what we're seeing now, what we're hearing now is really a push toward more sustainable staffing structures, more collaboration time for educators, stronger mental health supports, and also career advancement pathways, and honestly, preparation models that really reflect the realities of the modern day classroom. So I also think while some of these workforce aligned approaches like apprenticeships are gaining traction, they still force systems to think differently about how people enter and develop in the profession over time, and then expecting teachers to immediately operate independently without sustained support. So to that point, while there's like no silver bullet, I do think that the field is honestly beginning to shift toward more a systemic conversation about what it actually takes to recruit, prepare, support, and retain educators long term.
Thanks, Sabrina. I think on that note, we'll end this conversation for now. I want to thank our panelists, Wiade, Paige, Sabrina, Aurora. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your commitment to this work and for sharing it with us. If you want to stay involved and engaged with these organizations, please sign up for their newsletters. We're going to drop those links in the chat right now. You can sign up for the Center for American Progress, Educating All Learners, and the Pathways Alliance. And thank you everyone who joined, because that shows a commitment to this work that we're doing as well. And for the work that you're doing for students and teachers every day. And I hope to see you again soon. Have a great afternoon, everyone.